Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining. We've got quite a crowd here tonight, which is great. We're through 120 people. My name is Win Everts. I'm the Executive Director of the ARC Connecticut. And I want to thank you very much for attending this Zoom meeting this evening. Our topic this evening is understanding COVID-19 government benefits for people with IDD. And before I introduce our guest expert, Michael Beloff, I'd like to map out sort of how the call is going to proceed. Following his introduction, Mike is going to give you a summary of the economic stimulus items that have been legislated and how they may affect an individual with IDD's benefits and eligibility. And after he completes those remarks, he will answer questions from you. Due to the large number of participants, we will only be able to take questions online via the chat feature, which you will find at the bottom of your screen. To ask a question, move your device's cursor down to the chat icon and click on it, and a screen will open on the right side of your device, or the right side of your viewing area. Please type your name first and then the question following that. We're going to do our best to answer all the questions prior to the end of the meeting at 7:30. You can submit questions at any time, but they're not going to be answered until the question and answer session. Additionally, because of that time constraint, we're going to concentrate on answering general questions as opposed to questions really focused at a single individual's particular place to the greatest extent possible. Finally, this call is being recorded, so we will send you a sound recording of the call for your future reference. So without further delay, given our time constraint, it's my pleasure to introduce Michael Beloff. Mike is a wealth advisor, certified financial planner, and chartered special needs consultant. He's graciously here tonight because among his areas of expertise are government benefits, program maintenance, and eligibility criteria, and the interaction of individual and government actions with those benefits. He's also the father of a young man with autism, so he's walking in the same path as many of us. Mike, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. And my son, who is 21, is actually currently in a transition program, is aging out in about a month and a half, and will be entering adult services through DDS. I also serve on the board and treasurer of Ableist, which is a social service agency down in the lower Fairfield County area that provides early intervention and adult services and residential services for adults with IDD. And so a lot of this information comes from all the different sources that we have access to. And I wanted to start with just as a reminder of what's happened legislatively. The CARES Act was passed, providing a stimulus payment, now actually referred to as a economic impact payment. We all call it the stimulus payment, that provides funds for a certain amounts of individuals. And as a reminder, the basic stimulus payment is $1,200 for an individual or $2,400 for a couple. However, you need to have income below certain amounts to be eligible for a stimulus payment. If you're an individual, you have to have income under $75,000 to get the full $1,200. Between $75,000 and $100,000, there's a phase out. And if your AGI, if your income is above $100,000, you will not receive a stimulus payment as an individual. For a couple, those figures are doubled. So if you're a married couple and your AGI is under $150,000, you should be eligible for the full $2,400 stimulus payment. At amounts between AGI between 150 and 200, there is a phase out of that $2,400 stimulus payment, And if you're, as a couple, your AGI is above $200,000, you are not eligible for a stimulus payment at all. In addition, if you have a dependent who is under 17, so 16 or under, regardless of disability, as a parent, you are eligible for an additional $500 per child if you meet the income requirements. So as an example, if you are a family, married couple, 3 children under 16, you would be eligible for theoretically $3,900 as a stimulus payment. That is a one-time payment. There has been talk of additional stimulus, but for now, all that's been authorized is the one stimulus payment. Now, one caveat is you notice that for dependents, you are only eligible as a parent for a dependent stimulus payment if your dependent is under 17. So if you are declaring your adult child with IDD as a dependent on your taxes and they are over 16, you will not get a $500 stimulus payment for the dependent for that child. In addition, because the stimulus was meant for families, if technically your adult child who is on SSI, supplemental security income, theoretically, all by default, people who are on SSI make under $75,000. So SSI recipients are eligible for a stimulus payment. However, if you have declared your adult who is eligible for SSI as a dependent on your income taxes for 2019, if you filed your 2019 taxes, or if you haven't filed your 2019 taxes, you declare them as a dependent on 2018. For your adult children who are on SSI, if you carry them as a dependent on your taxes, they are not eligible for their own individual $1,200 stimulus payment. That's just the way the law was enacted. And that's been a confusion as to why different people are getting stimulus payments for their children. That's how the law was designed. It is possible in future stimulus, if there's future stimulus, that may be changed. There's been talk about that. But for the first CARES Act stimulus payments, those are who is eligible. Now, if your child is on SSI and you have not declared them as a dependent, they are eligible, as I mentioned, for their own $1,200 stimulus payment. If they get that, there has been a question as to how that affects various benefits, and we'll talk about that. So the first thing is, for anyone who receives a stimulus payment, for IRS purposes, so for tax purposes, both federal and state, that $1,200 is not taxable. So when you get your stimulus payment, if your child on SSI gets their stimulus payment, that money is not taxable. By the way, just to go back 1 second, there was a question early on as to how people on SSI would get a stimulus payment if they were eligible. There was a question of whether they had to register or not. And it was determined after a couple of weeks that because people with SSI are already registered, because they are getting their payments electronically deposited into the rep payee accounts, that there was no need for individuals on SSI to register with the IRS, and they should be getting their payments automatically. Those payments are coming in phases, so some of you may have received it, some of you may have not received it yet, but it is on its way. You did not need to register an individual with SSI on the IRS website to get the payment electronically. So going back to how that stimulus payment would affect benefits. it was determined that number one, the stimulus payment for SSI purposes would not count as unearned income, meaning that the month you receive the stimulus payment for your child, it will not reduce SSI. It does not count as unearned income. In addition, if you're not sure you have to spend it all at once, it will not count as a resource for SSI for 12 months. Meaning, if that extra $1,200 puts your child over the $2,000 asset limit for SSI, it will not interfere. And you can keep the extra money in their child's account for 12 months past when you receive the stimulus payment. Next, Social Security disability income. As opposed to SSI, which again is the income payment provided for individuals with disabilities who have limited income and assets. Some adults with disabilities are eligible for a Social Security disability income payment, either based on their work record or based on a work record of a parent if they have started receiving their Social Security. Because SSDI is not a needs-based program. If your child is on SSDI, they will not see any reduction or impact to that benefit for having received their stimulus payment. Next, we're going to go to Medicaid. And there's several things with Medicaid that were put into the CARES Act. The first is for states, while there is a national health emergency, for states like Connecticut that accepted additional increases in Medicaid dollars during the national emergency, no one can be kicked off Medicaid, Husky C, during the health crisis. That's number one. Number two, the stimulus payment will not count as either income for Medicaid purposes in the month it's received, and it will also be an exempted asset from the Medicaid limit, which for Husky C in Connecticut is $1,600 at the end of every month. The stimulus payment, if it's left in the account, will not count for the 12 months after you receive it. However, it can be, with those asset limits, families may want to consider spending down the money or perhaps transferring to something like an ABLE account so as not have to worry about 12 months from now what's going to happen. In addition, I expect that Social Security and DSS might get a little confused if there's extra money in the account, and having to remind them every month that this extra money is excluded might become challenging. And so you may want to, again, consider either spending the extra dollars on something that might benefit your child, or perhaps transferring to an ABLE account so it won't count against them. You don't have to worry about it. That is just something to consider. Finally, there are some additional needs-based benefits that are affected by assets and income, including housing vouchers, SNAP, and TANF. And it's been determined for this stimulus payment that the same rules will apply. It will not count as income for those benefit programs, and it will not count as an asset for 12 months for those benefit programs. So from the base stimulus payment, it is fairly straightforward. Essentially, SSI, just as a summary, SSI recipients who are not declared dependents on someone else's taxes are automatically eligible for the stimulus payments. It should not affect needs-based benefits from an income standpoint in the month the dollars are received, and it will not count as a resource for 12 months after the stimulus payment has been received. I'm also going to talk a little bit about that this will affect only a subset of families here. But for those who have individuals with IDD who are working, there was an additional portion to the CARES Act that affects those individuals, and it has to do with unemployment insurance. So if you have an individual who had competitive employment or some kind of paid employment through their program, if they are no longer able to go to work, technically they are eligible for unemployment insurance. And in fact, if you are on SSI and you lose your job, in many instances, you are required to apply for unemployment insurance. In general, unemployment insurance counts as unearned income. So if you had a job making, and I'm making up these numbers, $400 a month, and you lost that job, you'd still be eligible for your SSI and your benefits. But if you then lost that job due to COVID, then you would have to apply for unemployment. You might get $40 a week. I'm making up the number. If you got that $40 a week unemployment, that $40 counts as unearned income. And after the first $20, that unemployment would reduce SSI on a dollar for dollar basis. As unearned income, unemployment must be reported on a monthly basis to Social Security, like any other income that your child earns. And it will reduce the SSI payment. Usually there's about a 2-month delay from when you report it. So if they had unemployment of $40 a week or $160 in May, you would have to report that income to Social Security by early June, and the July SSI payment would be reduced appropriately based on the unearned income. Now, as part of the CARES Act, there was enhanced unemployment that was authorized. So everyone who is on unemployment is eligible for an additional $600 a week through the end of July. So what does that mean for our individuals on SSI who are getting unemployment? In the example that I gave, instead of getting $40 a week, they are now going to get $640 a week. So for that month, they would get that times 4. They would get $2,560 as unemployment insurance. That unemployment benefit will do several things. Number one, that will reduce their SSI to 0. Because as unearned income, once unearned income gets above $763 for 2017, because unearned income reduces SSI dollar for dollar, it will reduce their SSI basically to 0. That's okay, because again, under the CARES Act, Medicaid is protected during the national emergency. And the family will end up with more money. However, something to keep in mind, they will get that $2,560 for May, June, and July. At the end of those months of the enhanced unemployment would stop, and if your individual is still unemployed, they'll get bounced back to the $40 a week. However, at that point in August, you would need to reapply for SSI for your individual. But if you haven't spent that extra $2,500 in their account and it's still sitting there, they may be over the asset limit. So it's important that if you're an individual with IDD who's on SSI, and I apologize for all the acronyms, if they are receiving the enhanced unemployment, it will be important to do something with that extra money. And again, your general choices are spend it for their benefit and document it, because Medicaid and Social Security will want to know what you did with the money, or transfer it to an ABLE account so that come August, their SSI benefits can be recaptured. In addition, that unemployment may, and by the way, unemployment for tax purposes is taxable. And so it is possible that you may need to file a tax return for your individual if they're receiving the enhanced unemployment for those months if you had not been filing a tax return in the past. Something to keep in mind for next year. In addition, that extra unemployment may affect other needs-based benefits. By the way, if they're getting a Social Security disability income payment as a childhood disability benefit, meaning that, excuse me, they're receiving that SSDI based on a parent work record, because unemployment insurance is unearned income, it does not affect that benefit. In addition, because of the CARES Act, while there's still a national medical emergency, national health emergency, excuse me, the payment of that extra unemployment will not affect Medicaid Husky C. But again, you want to be careful that you want to keep the assets, because for Medicaid, since the asset limit is $1,600, you want to make sure you can spend down to that by the time that the national health emergency is over to preserve Husky C. It is for SNAP, for those individuals who are receiving what used to be called food stamps, it is unclear currently. I think DSS is still figuring this out as to how the extra unemployment may impact SNAP benefits in the short term. My opinion is, since SNAP is at most $193 a month, and the enhanced unemployment was much more than that, it's much better to take the enhanced unemployment rather than preserve the SNAP benefits during this time period. Again, there may be some benefits lost by collecting this unemployment insurance extra, but overall, the family will end up with more money. And so it's okay to accept it. That's really the end of it. There's lots of different interactions, but that's the main things I want to talk about to point out how these benefits work and how the interactions are. And I think at this time we can open it up for the questions.
That's great. Thank you very much, Mike. So the first question comes from Prabhu, and he or she is asking, what is the age limit of the child to receive the $500? And is the age calculated as of 2020 or 2018?
The age limit is 16. So to be a dependent, to be eligible for the $500 dependent benefit, the dependent has to be 16 or under. And I believe that was 16 or under. This I'm not as sure of. I believe they would have to have been 16 during 2019. If they turned 17 in 2019, they would not be eligible because it's based on your 2019 taxes.
Thank you. The next question is from Michelle Brabant. What if your adult disabled child is competitively employed, collects SSI, but was also claimed by a parent? Shouldn't they get the stimulus payment?
So the question was, well, there's a question between should and how the law was designed. So the law was designed that for that number one, only dependents that were under 16 were eligible for the dependent benefit for the parent. And the way the stimulus was designed was that it was designed essentially for families as how the act was set up. And so any dependent, anyone who was declared as dependent was not eligible for their own individual $1,200 stimulus payment. That would also include, by the way, if you had a senior parent who you were providing support for, say you have an in-law suite in your house and you have your 95-year-old parent living down there, and because you have provided more than half their support, you have declared them as a dependent, they also would not be eligible for their own independent payment. It was not a dig against SSI. It was meant to cover dependents as part of the other family. And I'll be honest, in my opinion, I don't think they even thought about SSI recipients when they designed the stimulus. They were just saying, if you were declared as a dependent, you're not eligible for your own independent stimulus payment. So it's not the fact that your child's on SSI, it's the fact that they're a dependent. And unfortunately, that's just the way it was designed.
Thank you. The next question is from Jean Hall. If a person with a disability is on Medicaid and now cannot work as a result of COVID, what is going to happen to her Medicaid benefits, I think is where the question is going. Is she protected? And if she is unable to use her SNAP personally, which is a criteria of that program, will the person lose their SNAP during this shelter-in-place time?
Sure. So for the two questions, as part of the CARES Act, Medicaid benefits are preserved as long as there's still a declared national health emergency. So for the time being, losing her job, having the job is not a criteria for Medicaid as benefit. Then let's make a distinction between Medicaid as health insurance and Medicaid as access to benefits and services through, say, DDS. Losing your job will not make you ineligible for Medicaid. In fact, it may make you, more eligible. There has been a challenge with SNAP benefits in that typically online delivery grocery, usually you can't use your SNAP benefits for any of the delivery payments like Peapod or delivery. Typically you have to go into the store, and that's been a challenge given the stay-in-place orders and families not wanting to really expose themselves. Unfortunately, there's not a good answer for that. Typically for SNAP benefits, if you don't use them in a particular month, they are gone and wasted. And so families will just need to make decisions as to whether they're going to venture out into the community to a store to access the SNAP benefits. It is possible that may be addressed in the future, but unfortunately, the SNAP program did not ever anticipate that people would not be able to go into stores and purchase food in that way. And it's an unfortunate side effect of everything that's going on.
Our next question comes, and it deals with the definition for what employment is in order to apply for unemployment. Can you characterize it in that way? In particular, if somebody's in a vocational program, if somebody gets paid sub-minimum wage, or if somebody gets paid a competitive wage.
So with regards to unemployment, there are specific rules. So each state gets to decide how they're going to implement unemployment insurance. What I would recommend is going to, there's a website in Connecticut. Unfortunately, I don't have the direct link, but there is a website for unemployment eligibility. Typically, you had to have worked for a certain amount of time and a certain amount of dollars earned to be eligible for unemployment. It is worthwhile to go to that website, plug in the numbers for the affected individual, and that website will tell you whether you're eligible or not.
Thank you. The next question is from Dell. Is there a limit to how much one can transfer into an ABLE account each year?
Yes, there is. So ABLE accounts have limits. Generally, you can only put in $15,000 into an ABLE account in any one calendar year. There is one caveat to that if an individual works, that individual can put up to the federal poverty limit, which right now is about $12,000 and change, of their own money in addition to the $15,000, but that's only if they have earned income from working. If you've already put money into an ABLE account, and without this anticipation, you may want to look into other things like spend downs and looking for some bigger ticket items. That may be something you want to discuss with your tax and financial advisors to figure out the best way if you're bumping up into that limit.
I should have asked this question before the last one, but the next questions, could you please define and talk a little bit about what an ABLE account is?
Sure. So an ABLE account is a disability savings account that had been authorized probably starting about 5 or 6 years ago. If you're familiar with CHET or a 529 account, it works very similarly. The idea behind an ABLE account is that it's a disability savings account where you can put aside money, or an individual with disabilities can put aside money into an account, and it does not count against the assets or asset limits that are geared towards with Medicaid and SSI. Money in the ABLE accounts grows tax deferred, and if it's used for something called qualified disability expenses, the money will come out tax-free for those expenses and not count as income or an asset for that purpose. We do not have one natively here in Connecticut, but there are 44 other states that have ABLE accounts, many of which are open to non-residents. And essentially, that's the basics of how it works. They get a little more complicated than that. There are folks, I give workshops, and some other financial advisors give workshops on ABLE accounts, and that's something to be discussed at another time. But that's the basics of what an ABLE account is.
The next question comes from Maricela Magana. Will unemployment payments count for and maybe against rent subsidy?
So hold on a second, let me just see. So one of the resources that can be very helpful for this is there was a worksheet, a form that was sent out prior to the meeting, produced by the Cornell Institute on Employment and Disability, that went through a lot of the topics that we went through today. So if you want, we didn't have slides for today, but if you wanted something that was written out, that link that was sent through prior to the meeting goes through a bunch of these things. I think it's unfortunately sort of unclear how the extra unemployment is going to affect housing subsidies. A lot of the housing subsidies are joint federal and state partnerships. And I think that's similar to the SNAP benefits, which are administered jointly between the federal government and the state of Connecticut. It's unclear how that's going to be affected. I think the short answer is, because it's a month-by-month basis, if it does affect the housing subsidy, the family will still end up with more money, because I'm assuming your housing subsidy is less than the $2,400 of the extra unemployment benefit. But it is unclear, and you might want to confer further with your contact for that particular benefit.
Thanks. I'm looking at a question. I'm having a hard time getting it, but I think what it is, can you talk about the impact, again, summarize the impact of going on unemployment to your SSI and other benefits? I think
sure. So as a reminder, unemployment in general has always been considered unearned income for SSI purposes. What that means is that, so when you have earned income, when your individual works, you may be familiar with this, they get to keep the first $85 of earned income in a month, after which their SSI gets reduced by $1 for every $2 that they earn when they're working. Unearned income, meaning any income that comes from not working for it, it has a different effect. After the first $20 of unearned income, you lose $1 of SSI for every $1 of unearned income. And because unemployment is considered unearned income, SSI gets reduced dollar for dollar. So ordinarily, when your individual on SSI loses a job, while they may be required to apply for unemployment, it doesn't do anything, because if they got $40 of unemployment, they lose $40 of SSI. But you still have to apply for it because of how the federal government shares different things. However, with this extra unemployment, with the COVID unemployment of $600 a week or $2,400 a month, because that $2,400 is more than the maximum SSI of $783 a month, it's going to reduce the SSI down to 0. Again, because of the way the CARES Act was written, if the SSI goes away, or if their unearned income exceeds the Medicaid limit for unearned income here in Connecticut, they are not in danger of losing their Medicaid, because it's been deemed that Medicaid can't be lost during this national health emergency. And that's expected to keep going through the end of July, or the time period for the enhanced unemployment. What that means is, so think about this conceptually. If your individual is not working, they would get $783 of SSI, because their earned income would not be reduced in the SSI. If they're getting unemployment, they're getting $2,500 of unemployment and 0 of SSI. $2,500 is better than $783. So the family will be better off, but technically SSI will be lost. And then once the unearned income is no longer there, you have to notify Social Security, because when you get unemployment insurance as unearned income, that is reportable to Social Security in your monthly earnings report that you have to give. You will want to let Social Security know that they're no longer receiving the enhanced unemployment, so they'll turn on the SSI. Because there's a 2-month delay, that means the SSI should start up again in September.
Thank you. Is unemployment also, does unemployment also affect SSDI benefits in the same way?
Because Social Security disability income, based either on your child's own work record or a parent's work record, unemployment does not affect SSDI. SSDI is not a needs-based benefit. It is not affected by assets and income. If your child is on SSDI and that SSDI has already wiped away SSI, then the only issue with their earning money is with Medicaid. And as we said, the unemployment will not affect Medicaid in the short term.
The next question is from Mike Ryan. Are there any requirements about what we spend the $1,200 on to reduce the balance by the end of the year?
So the answer is no, but. So remember, as a representative payee, you are responsible for managing your child's or the individual you are in charge of money. That money is meant to be spent for their sole benefit. So the same rules for spending money out of their SSI money are the same as spending the stimulus money. That money should be spent for the individual's sole benefit. You don't want to buy a TV for the living room because they might watch it. The money should be spent for their sole needs. That will protect you the most.
So the next question is from Kathy, and it's related to this. How about spending the extra unemployment insurance money? Are there requirements for that?
The short answer is the requirements are less. So again, it goes to, and this gets a little into the weeds, With SSI money, that money should be spent for their sole benefit because you're the rep payee. Their money that they earn, they can spend as they choose. You may want to be prudent because, again, not that your kid's going to come after you for how you spent their money, but you do want to make, you have if the money is going into if they only have one account and it's all going into the rep payee account, you still have a fiduciary duty as to how you spend their money as their guardian and so forth. And so typically any money that's theirs should be spent as they would spend it on themselves if they can articulate that, or spend it for their benefit. There is not a lot of tolerance for parents who steal their kids' money. You just want to be careful. And if you're not sure if it's something you'd be spending it on, you should consider whether you should be spending it on that.
The next question comes from Susan Swarting. You mentioned earlier that those on SSI may have to apply for unemployment. Can you clarify what that situation is?
Sure. In general, and again, I don't know these specific rules, but in general, when you're on public benefits, they want you to take advantage of all the different programs that are available to you. Unfortunately, I don't know that particular topic off the top of my head. That would be something you want to address with your Social Security representative. But my feeling is, even if you don't have to, it's worthwhile to do because the extra money, I'm sure, will be helpful for many families. And so why not?
The next question comes from Pam Lewis. Is a person who is receiving only $16 weekly from unemployment still eligible for the additional $600 weekly?
If you're receiving anything from unemployment, you're eligible for the extra $600.
Thank you. A question from Kathy. Will DDS budgets be affected if a person has unemployment insurance?
That is unclear. There has been not a lot of information from DDS as to how unemployment will affect their individual budget, how it will affect budgets going forward next year, and so forth. And so it's unclear how unemployment insurance, I don't think, and this may be for some of the families where their kids have been in and out of work, I don't think unemployment insurance in general has affected the DDS budget, but that's something that should be checked with your caseworker. I think the answer is it should not, but we don't know.
Let's see. Kristen asks, I thought SNAP rolls over to the next month if not used. And separately, can people do a curbside pickup and use their SNAP card for that?
I can't speak to the rollover of SNAP at the present time. If the supermarket or grocery store will accept SNAP for curbside pickup, great. The indication has been that many will not, and that has been the issue. That oftentimes the online systems for ordering, depending on the store, may not be set up for online usage. And that has been the challenge. It's not that the store doesn't take the SNAP, it's that their online systems were not set up specifically for that. It's also unclear, I think, because many delivery services charge extra. I don't know if curbside pickup for an individual store would charge extra, but I think because it's possible that SNAP cards may not be able to pay for either a delivery charge or a pickup charge. That may be why some stores have not allowed SNAP to be used for those types of purchasing. And I apologize, I'm not as familiar with SNAP as some of the other benefits. And so, it may be possible that SNAP could be rolled over. I'm just not as familiar with that as some of the other benefits that are available.
Sheila Mulvey asks, can you stop unemployment insurance at any time?
Unemployment insurance typically is automatic. Generally, unemployment insurance pays out for 26 weeks, is the standard payment period. As part of the CARES Act, unemployment has been extended to 39 weeks, but the enhanced unemployment, the extra $600 a week, is only through the end of July under the current plan.
Lori Kraus asks, will my daughter, now unemployed, receiving unemployment, still receive her SSA?
I don't know what SSA is. Again, there are two main benefits: SSI, which is supplemental security income, and SSDI, which is Social Security disability income. SSI is the needs-based benefit, which, because it's eliminated due to unearned income, will go away if the total unemployment is more than $783 for the month. SSDI, which is for individuals who can glom onto a work record, either their own or parents, is not affected by unemployment insurance.
Kathy asks, when is the Medicaid exemption for the extra income ending?
So we don't know. So under the CARES Act, as long as there's a declared national health emergency, people cannot be kicked off Medicaid. We don't know when we will no longer be under a declared national health emergency. And that is why I would encourage families to, for that. Now remember, the extra assets due to stimulus payments you can keep the extra $1,200 from stimulus for up to 12 months. You can't keep the extra money from unemployment. And we don't know when the declared national health emergency will be over. And so it'll be prudent for families to deal with the extra dollars from unemployment in the short term.
So Clifford Locke's question is, since a disabled person is not working through their program, how does SSI get adjusted upward during this time of not working?
So remember, and what this person is referring to is that when you work, you are required to tell Social Security about your income, and then they reduce your SSI payment based on, you get to keep the first $85 of earned income, and then SSI is reduced dollar for dollar, dollar for every $2 of earned income. Typically, there is a 2-month delay till it's affected in your payment. So work in April typically is reported in May and is affected in your June SSI payment. So because you are required to report your income monthly, when you report to SSI that your child is no longer working, say they lost their job April 1st. On early May, you'll report to Social Security that they no longer had earned income for the month of April. And in May, you do that in May, and in June, the SSI would be affected upward for the fact they no longer have earned income for that month.
Thank you, and thank you to those of you in the audience that have some expertise in some of the areas that Mike does not. Some folks that work at DDS have said that there won't be any relationship between the unemployment benefits that you get and the effect on your DDS budgets. So that sort of closes an open question a little bit. And a couple people believe that SNAP can roll over. Is there a, given the shelter in place, has there been any measures put into place that allow people to roll money that they would have needed to spend within a month into the next month because of being either quarantined voluntarily or involuntarily?
The answer is, I'm assuming you're not talking about any kind of DDS budget, but you're talking about the SSI funds that are being deposited
SSI.
automatically. The answer is no. Under the CARES Act, if you go over the $1,600 in your SSI, in your total assets, countable assets, because of the CARES Act, your Medicaid will not be affected. However, if the account goes over $2,000, they will cut off the SSI. So if you're not able to spend the money because of shelter in place, you may want to use an ABLE account to do that. In addition, you either have to find a way to spend it or move it to an ABLE account. They have not as yet made an exemption to the asset limit for SSI, only for Medicaid.
I'm sorry, I'm going down through some questions that have already been asked and answered. Let's see. This question will sort of clarify the two sides of Medicaid, I think. Lori Krause asks, you say Medicaid is not affected if on unemployment, but my daughter is receiving a bill from MedConnect of $147 a month, question mark.
I guess the question is that a new bill because she now has enhanced income? That may be due to a specific way that MedConnect is operating based on income. It'd be hard to speak to that without some additional information. I would say my experience has been that DSS is answering phones during this crisis, and if there's a specific issue with additional MedConnect bills because of unemployment, I would contact DSS directly and inquire as to why there was an additional bill paid for that. Without more information, but I think DSS would be the proper folks to ask about why an additional premium payment was asked for.
A couple people have mentioned that there may be other things that people can do with the stimulus money and enhanced unemployment during this particular time. And one of them that's been put forward is prepaid burial funeral accounts. Are there anything that people should know about investing in that kind of thing that might be an issue or a problem, or is that a bona fide investment?
So under the POMS, which is the Program Operational Manual System, which are the rules to Social Security, there are a variety of items that don't count as assets for benefit purposes. One of which is a house. And although many assets count, again, there are certain assets that are exempt. One is a house, one is a car, one is a prepaid burial plot. There are not a lot of other exempt assets for benefit purposes, but a prepaid burial plot is one of them.
Thank you.
And more of those can be found in the POPs.
So Jessica Alexander asks, if the person returned to work already and only received the extra $600 for a few weeks, will they have to reapply in July for SSI?
So for that purpose, it's not July. So remember, you only have to reapply for SSI if your SSI went away for a series of months. Depending on how long the individual was on unemployment, it would appear that that individual only lost SSI for that 1 month. So you wouldn't wait till July. I would say that the month after you stopped receiving the extra unemployment, I would contact Social Security and let them know that your income, that the unearned income will now be below the amount where SSI will be eliminated, and please start it up again.
We heard back from Lori Krause, and she says the $147 bill is a new bill. So
it sounds as if MedConnect, which is a very specific income program, it's a very specific Medicaid program unique to Connecticut, and it is possible that they may be using unearned income to slide up and down the scale of a premium for Medicaid. It is possible that is what's happening. Again, I would reach out to DSS to find out, and because again, typically only the base stimulus payment of $1,200 was exempt from affecting needs-based benefits. It sounds like it may be possible that the extra unemployment may be affecting the MedConnect premium. However, keep in mind, you're still going to end up with more money than if you had not applied for the unemployment. But I would reach out to DSS directly.
Thank you. Melissa Payne asks, would you suggest requesting additional state supplemental cash and an increase in SSI rather than applying for unemployment, since we know the unemployment benefit will eventually affect individuals we provide services to?
The answer is no. You can't request more SSI. SSI has a maximum number of $783 a month, which is reduced if there is earned or unearned income. So the maximum you'd get if just getting SSI is $783. If the individual would get unemployment insurance, they would get $600 a week plus whatever base unemployment they were eligible for. They will end up with more money. And so I think it would be prudent to go that route if you can, provide more money to the individual. I do know that there has been some guidance from DDS for agencies that are rep payees for residents of group homes, and the guidance has been that that extra stimulus money should be spent on the individual. Many of those individuals have wish lists, things they would love to purchase but never have enough money. This extra money is an opportunity to fulfill those wish lists for the individuals, especially for families that have not been able to afford those extras. And why not take advantage of it?
Anna Lou Newcomb asks, how long do families have to spend down the extra $600? 12 months? And should receipts be kept? So
two things. Only remember there's two different payments. The $1,200 stimulus payment that SSI, individuals on SSI who are not tax dependents, that money can remain in the account for up to 12 months and not count against them for benefits purposes. extra unemployment money, that $600 a week that they may be eligible for through the end of July, does not have that exemption. And that money should be dealt with by the end of July, so that starting with the month of August, they will be eligible for SSI again. In addition, since we don't know, that's just for SSI. For Medicaid purposes, that money will not count as long as there's a declared national health emergency. The end of the national health emergency is unknown. The government could declare it over tomorrow. They could declare it over in December. We don't know how long the Medicaid exemption for the assets, for any asset, will be there.
Going back to the prepaid burial accounts, is there a cap on the burial expenses that won't count as an asset?
I do not believe that there's a cap on what can be done for a prepaid burial account. Okay. You can also look into perpetual care as an asset as well, if that's important to you and your family.
Sheila Mulvey asks, how do you set up an ABLE account in Connecticut if since so far we may not have a purveyor inside the state?
Correct. Connecticut does not have its own native ABLE account. Like I said, about 44 or 45 other states do, and a good portion of them are open to non-residents, i.e. residents of Connecticut. ABLE accounts are generally not sold through financial intermediaries like financial advisors like myself. So typically you will need to go online and open an account. Many ABLE accounts are similar, but each of them have their own quirks. There is a great resource at ablenrc.org. It's the ABLE National Resource Center. And you can do research on how they work and so forth. There are some quirks for families where both mom and dad are co-guardians, and there are some ABLE accounts that work better than others, and that's something that can be spoken to on an individual basis. If you are working with a financial advisor, they may be, your advisor, even though they're not getting paid on it, may be able to opine as to what a good ABLE account may be for you and your family.
The question has come in, under the CARES Act, do you need to apply for the $1,200 or is it automatic with direct deposit? My disabled adult son is not a dependent and receives SSI, and he has never worked.
If you file taxes, or if you're receiving SSDI or railroad benefits, or receiving SSI, you do not need to do anything, and you should automatically receive a stimulus payment. In addition, if you're in those categories and you are set up for direct deposit of your payment, or direct deposit for your taxes, the stimulus payment will get to you automatically at some point. If you yourself as a family are on SSI and do not file taxes, you will get your own stimulus payment. However, if you're in that situation where you're on SSI yourself and you have dependents under the age of 16, so that you're on SSI, don't file taxes, and are eligible for the dependent payments, there were some issues because probably the IRS does not know about your kids because you don't file taxes. There was a deadline of yesterday to register the kids online. And so for those families who are on SSI themselves, if you have minor dependent children, their checks will come by mail sometime later this year. But if you're on SSI as an adult, there is no longer a need to register with the IRS. That's a change from a couple of weeks ago. They finally worked that out.
So related to another question, the first, is it fair to say that the first payments that are going to go out will go out electronically, and then physical checks will follow?
That is correct. The electronic payments should go out first, and then paper checks are expected to go out after that in a series of waves.
Thanks. I'm just going back through the questions that were answered before that were sort of more individual in nature, because we wanted to attend to the general ones first. Let's see. Could you detail for Kathy a little bit about the investment options that most of the ABLE accounts offer in terms of volatility, risk, and savings rates?
Sure. So most ABLE accounts, and there are several organizations that run some of them. So there's a cadre of 12 states that operate under a similar chassis. There's another series of about 10 states that operate on a different chassis. Typically, for most ABLE accounts, there are limited investment choices. Many of them, essentially most of them have between, say, 4 and 6 different risk-based options from conservative to aggressive. Generally, the internal expense ratio of those investment mixes are around 0.5%, again, depending on the state and the plan. There are no commissions generally for ABLE accounts, and most ABLE accounts have a cash option to allow you to put them in savings. But again, typically it's going to be limited to, say, an index fund like mix, and you cannot choose individual investments or stocks, only what's available through that ABLE account. It all depends on how you're going to use the money. Many families are using it just as a way to shelter dollars, and the expectation is that those dollars will be spent in the short term, in which case you may just want to choose the cash option. For longer term assets, you may want to choose the investment options. What risk profile you choose is going to be based on the individual family and what you're looking for. Many of the ABLE accounts have options for checking or for a debit card to spend the money appropriately. And the differences between them are how you might want to choose an individual ABLE account. But typically, in general, the investments are typically very limited.
Great. If somebody's acting as a rep payee for a family member or somebody else, do they have to have a bank account that says that in the title of the account?
It depends on the individual bank. If you are applying for SSI for an eligible child with disabilities, the bank should open a specific type of account called a representative payee account. My experience has been, both for myself, when we did it for our son, and from clients, is that sometimes an individual teller you might go to open an account may not be familiar with it, and you may need to go through several managers to get somebody who's familiar with a rep payee account. But it's a very specific style of account because it is in the name and social security number of the individual who is eligible for it, but the representative payee, is the person who is in charge of it and makes the decisions. So it may not necessarily say rep payee in the statement you get. When you get the statement, it may look like a joint account, but internally at the bank, it should be categorized as a representative payee account.
Very good, and thank you, Michelle Bravin, for asking that question and making that point. Are we really running out of questions, folks? I think we might be. Mike, do you want to say any words as we head towards 7:30?
Sure. I mean, you know, benefits coordination gets very complicated because each program has different constituents who are running it and different rules, you know, and so SSI versus Medicaid versus SNAP versus housing versus DDS all operate in a different manner. And I think it's important to keep in mind as you're looking to coordinate things that different things affect different benefits differently. And because they're run by so many different various entities, they don't often coordinate or even care as to how the interactions. And unfortunately, we end up as parents becoming our own benefits coordinators. And so it's helpful to get educated and you know, work with your local agency if you're affiliated with one. If they don't necessarily have a benefits manager in the agency, maybe you should work with them to maybe consider hiring one. I know a lot of agencies don't have it, but it can be a valuable resource. Finally, if you have additional questions or questions about the individual financial planning services they offer to families, you can visit my website at michaelbeloff.org and find more and schedule an appointment if that makes sense for you. But I appreciate the time, and hopefully at some point we can do something else like this as well.
Well, thank you very much for being with us tonight, Mike. It was a great session.
Great.
Enjoy the rest of your evening, and I look forward to seeing you in person sometime soon.
Yeah, thank you, Ed.
Thanks. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending. As Shannon's indicated in the chat, we will distribute the soundtrack from the meeting following the meeting. And thanks. And have a good evening and stay healthy.